Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dose of Dental podcast. The focus of this podcast is to share undergraduate and dental school experiences from dental students and dental professionals through valuable discussions. Through sharing the journeys and the stories of current dental students and dental professionals, our goal is to help you find answers or guidance for your own pre-dental journeys. We are very excited to have Stony Brook dental student Brandon Axelrod as our guest today. Brandon graduated from Cornell University with a bachelor's degree in biology and society, along with completed minors in nutritional science and business. He's now an incoming D2 student at Stony Brook School of Dental Medicine. During his undergraduate years, we can definitely say Brandon was a little bit busy, founding and serving as president of a nonprofit organization, board member of an orientation committee, which organized orientation events for incoming Cornell University students, as well as conducting and publishing research. Now in dental school, Brandon serves as the vice president of the community engagement in the American Student Dental Association, also known as ASDA. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the podcast. How does it feel to get that first year of dental school under your belt, and how are you?
Wow. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me, guys. It seems like an excellent podcast you guys have going on, but it feels great. We kind of went from the full first year in the med school, and we kind of, at the tail end, we were working on some hand skills. We finished operative dentistry one, along with dental morphology, but it feels really great to have that first year under my belt, I guess you could say, and looking forward to D2 when we start maybe seeing some pediatric patients, doing some prophylactic care. So there's a lot to look forward to.
Wow, I cannot wait to dive into all those things. But first, why don't you tell us about yourself, like where you're from, what we like to do for fun.
Yeah, for sure. So, like you guys mentioned, my name is Brandon. I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm from a family of four. And so I went to Cornell University for undergrad. And Stony Brook School of Dental Medicine was always the school that I was looking at. Not only is it close to home, but has an excellent reputation. And it kind of was in line with everything that I was looking for in a dental school. So I guess you guys kind of mentioned some things I did in undergrad and Stony Brook, and hopefully there's a lot of other things I'll involve myself with at school. D1 year, there's a lot of you worrying about the academics primarily. But I guess let me think. What can I talk about here? I guess one thing that is pretty big on my application, something that's part of my personality, and all my friends know me for it, is that ever since I was 5 years old, I had been doing magic. And through the years, what's happened is I stopped doing magic, but I actually picked up balloon twisting. And this is like when I say balloon twisting, it's like extreme balloon twisting. Like it's I can make anything the kids ask for, from Sonic the Hedgehog to Ride of a Unicorn. It's really fun for me, and I can literally I welcome the challenge. So whenever a kid comes over and asks, to make them something, I'm ready to go. And this is a full-fledged business that I'm able to run while being in dental school. I work every weekend, multiple parties a weekend, birthday parties, block parties, bar mitzvahs, communions, literally anything. And so that's a big part of kind of was my application, and something that I'm able to do in dental school, and it's really fun for me. But besides that, I like going to the gym. I like running. These are some things that I've been able to do, of course, while being in dental school, and they're great stress relievers. I'm happy to talk about some of that stuff as well. But hopefully that was a nice little intro. And I guess that the ultimate goal for me is to incorporate these sorts of skills that I have in terms of balloon twisting into my practice. Not sure if I want to do pediatrics, but regardless of whatever I pick, I'm sure any age group will find that entertaining and definitely alleviate some of the stress of going to the dentist.
Honestly, that's like one of the most unique things I've ever heard from like any dental student or even like a doctor.
Really?
Um, yeah, and like if you want to go into pediatrics, I think balloon twisting would be, you'd be pretty successful. I think so.
Yeah, yeah. No,
If you twist a kid a balloon after an appointment or something like that, oh my goodness, that'd be
no,
so.
yeah. In the cards, I would say. I'm honestly between pediatrics and oral surgery. So
Right.
I know they're kind of polar opposite ends of the scale. But like I said, I'll see kids, obviously, regardless of whatever specialty, even if I do general, of course, I'll see kids. So any way possible that I can incorporate that would be the ultimate goal.
Right. So everyone needs that fuel to their journey, right? So we wanted to ask you like that question, the question that comes with your interviews, like everything. So why dentistry? Like what motivated you to be where you are today?
Yeah, of course. I actually didn't really allude to this earlier, but in my whole like upbringing and life is really interrelated. So, like I mentioned, when I was five, I slipped and fell in the I started doing magic, and the reason I started doing magic is because I slipped and fell in the shower. I promise you this is related. I slipped and fell in the shower. I went face first and like into a tile, whatever the shower situation was at the house. And my two front teeth got impact, like got pushed up into my gums, and I'm bleeding and I'm crying, and it's the whole thing. And my parents, of course, the first instinct is, rush me to the dentist. And 5-year-olds are not like rushed to the dentist, like emergency. He wasn't even a pediatric dentist. He was my dad's dentist for years.
Right.
I'm not sure if he had seen kids really that frequently, but I get there and puts me down in the chair, and I literally was laughing so hard from just how great of a guy he was. Like it was like he was cracking jokes, and like the fact that he was able to manage me in that situation is really astonishing and admirable. Um, but when he was finished, I honestly thought he was joking. I thought it was part of the shtick he was put. Like I thought he was joking because it seemed very very quick in my eyes, and I felt a lot better. He put a gauze pad in my mouth and then snapped his fingers and pulled out a red sponge ball. So like I learned that he knew magic, and whenever he had a chance, and it was infrequent, but whenever he had a chance, he would do magic for his pediatric patients. Um, and so that was like the moment where I was like, I want to do this. Like this is what I want. This is what I'm born to do. um, so every time I went to the dentist, I was obviously like the most excited patient. He like took a real strong liking towards me, and he would show me like little magic tricks as I would go, and I would do them for the hygienist and the secretarial staff. And I had just a great relationship there. I really enjoyed going to the dentist. And like I mentioned, as time went on, I actually stepped away from the magic, and balloon twisting became a thing that I was into. I took like the most basic lessons for like a dog, a sword, and like a snake, but I was like, that's so lame. I was young enough to know the kids wanted like, the characters from movies and things like that. But to get back to like, why dentistry, it's kind of incorporates everything that I've come to love. I really love. First of all, I've always loved science in school. I really like the idea of being artistic, and that's something that, of course, I tried to relay through my in my personal statement and interviews that my whole kind of it's called balloon artistry for a reason, where I fully have to create on the spot whatever is being requested. Um, and it's just really working with people. And I really am looking to make that difference. I want to create my own style where I'm like staying informed about the lives of my patients, and leaving lasting impressions like my dentist did. And it's kind of interesting. It's like both my side hustle and dentistry kind of both involve these technical movements with your hands and like working with your hands, but they're both kind of designed to gain trust in a sense, and that's something that I played with in my personal statement. And so that's kind of my answer. Yeah.
Right. So forget what I said about unique before. I think this is even more unique. That sounds like an amazing story. I'm actually amazed at how this all just kind of fits together like a puzzle. I mean, it doesn't get more genuine than that, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, as you went through undergrad, how did you not lose focus of your why? Like, was it something that has been like motivated you since it occurred, and you just kind of ran with it, or yeah, just how did you maintain that fire throughout this whole process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess starting in high school, this is when I kind of like turned it up a notch in the sense that I knew that for undergrad I needed to be like have a strong science background, and I did science research. So if there's any high school students listening, I think science research is a great way to get yourself involved with the literature that's out there, scientific literature, and not just doing well in chemistry and biology are great, but like I think some colleges want to see that you're really expanding upon these things. So I was lucky to get connected with a research fellow from the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research in high school. And so that was a really cool project to learn kind of what academia is like within dentistry at an early age. Um, so the early years, basically summarizing research and just having a love for science. And then when I'm in college, of course, there were times where, being that I wasn't in a dental office or seeing dental professionals very often, there are times when you think like, maybe there would be something that I would possibly be interested in more. So maybe I was thinking more so the medicine route. As you mentioned, I was a business minor. I actually did a summer where I did a full-on business internship in New York City, just to see what it was like. And I was lucky to get that opportunity. Um, And I quickly learned that, yeah, there's no way I want to do anything like hardcore investment banking. This is the worst thing ever. But personally for me, I really like working. I really want to work with people. I really want to make that impact and make that difference. So I was right back on the train for the dental. Um, and let's see, like I said, like science research, these are important things to stay involved with. And then I guess something that helped me too was all the clubs and the volunteering that I did. And again, it puts it into perspective. Like there are people out there who really can value your help and dentistry. Like I'm learning more and more every day through school. It's like, not everything's always peachy for people. Like I've been lucky to have a great dental experience besides when I was, younger, and I haven't really had any cavities or any real dental ailments. But I'm seeing in the clinic, I'm seeing in PowerPoint slides, like there are some people out there who really, really need dental treatment like immensely. And like they can't function without going to like people neglect their teeth and neglect their oral health. And you're going to be there for them, and you're going to be their kind of their savior in that sense, and really make that difference. So kind of just keeping those things in mind. And it always helped, of course, that I knew from such a young age that I wanted to do it, and I really committed to it. But those are some points.
We can definitely relate to, being in school only and not in the office, like assisting or something like that. You get like lost in your books and like lost in education, and like when you're not around the practice that much, you kind of start thinking a lot. Um, so like definitely like I assist, even during school I do part-time. So doing that like maybe once a week kind of like reignites that spark that I want to do this the entire time, right? Um,
Excellent.
yeah,
And
I'm
schools would love to see that as well, that you're
right,
assisting.
right.
That's a great thing.
And I'm also like a business administration major, also with the bio major. So like, yeah, business is cool. But I remember doing like, I worked in like a real estate office in junior year of high school, and I hated it. It was like a desk job, like 5 days a week, and I was like, I cannot do this. So every time I like think about dentistry, like, am I still on this path? I just think about like that summer that I just sat in the desk, and then
Yeah,
compared to assisting, which is like you're standing up, you're interacting with patients, you're helping people. So that's kind of how
absolutely.
similar to you, that's how I keep my, spark.
Yeah, and it's great that you can combine the aspects of business and dentistry into
Right.
one. All the great aspects of business are involved with dentistry, whereas like the desk job, like sitting in one spot making Excel sheets, you're not really doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be if you're lucky or you're involved in a practice that has a business manager, like yeah, there might be some of that. But like you're honestly like you're like a performer when you're doing dentistry. Like you're out there, like you're kind of not only you're the expert, but like you're kind of the mastermind behind any sort of business or practice. And I think it's just for me personally, and it seems like maybe the two of you like combining the business because you're doing this podcast. It's a great initiative. Kind of shows that like that savviness in a sense. I think the two of you are probably set up really really well for a career in dentistry.
Appreciate that. So I wanted to go back into like your research. So how did that happen? How did you? I know you briefly like mentioned how you got it, but how was it? How was your experience? How'd you get in the lab? Things like that. Like how long did it take to publish? The
Yeah.
whole thing.
So my school, and some schools might have a similar situation, but they'll post that there's certain professors who are looking for undergrad research assistants, and I highly recommend to anyone interested in research to look into that. And here's a point, and I guess a misconception that you don't need to do research within biology. You don't need to you don't need to be curing cancer as an undergrad if your major is like food science, for example. Like it doesn't need to be so beyond your scope that it's uncomfortable. You're taking all your time, and frank, it should be enjoyable to some extent. It really shouldn't be. You're going into dentistry unless of course, there are people who want to do research and publish and work at a dental school, for example, within academia and want to publish. Sure, I feel like for the vast majority of people, and myself included, I'm looking to involve myself with science beyond, like I said, the classes and things like that. And I want to have some of that exploration and kind of working with a PI, for example. But it should be something enjoyable is basically the point of what I'm saying. For example, one of my current roommates, he did research on frogs, like with it, it was totally like within their environment. It was like nothing. It was like ecology. It was no relation to teeth, no relation to human health. And that's all dental schools want to see, is that you're doing something that you're passionate about and you're taking that extra step. So that's the first thing. But like I was saying, I looked into schools, into which professors were looking for undergrad research assistants. I somehow was the luckiest when it comes to this, because I was able to get a position within a taste bud research lab, which is like perfectly related. And like it goes against what I just said, but it really does not matter what you're doing in terms of research. So we looked at taste buds, and specifically how it's related to obesity. And without all the boring details, it was a really great experience. I did a good amount of both lab work. I did a lot of imaging. And then I was also able to contribute to the actual authorship of the paper. So it was a really, really rewarding experience. And let me think. Yeah, so I guess the timeline, right? So you asked about that. Um, I started my sophomore year. I started sophomore spring, I believe. I think I wanted to get Orgo out of the way. I took Orgo 1 during fall of sophomore year. And then I think during that second semester of sophomore year, I was like, I could fit in research at this point. And I did it all the way up until my senior spring. And like I said, it was a really great experience. If you have more questions, I'm happy to kind of talk about the details there.
Yeah, so like how exactly did you get the research? What did you have to do in order to reach out to these advisors and kind of put your name out there? And uh, I know it's a little discouraging sometimes. Even me personally, I felt it's a little tough to get the attention of these advisors and these PIs and professors. And so, what would you what kind of advice would you give pre-dentals who are interested in looking to get into research?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I reached out to 3 labs, and so the one hit that I had was Facebook one. So the way that I kind of reached out was they don't want to see like the longest. They don't want to see like a personal statement when you reach out to them. Because these people are like full-time faculty. They have their grad students they're worrying about. They have their grants and the current public things they're working on. So you don't want to like. I've seen a lot of people try to reach out to professors with research, and they write this long personal statement email, and it's like they don't really care about that. I think it's the best thing in the email to show just your willingness to contribute in any way that you can. You should give them your availability up front, and I think a reasonable availability for a position where for a lab in which you'll be put in a position to publish is, I think, maybe 10 to 12 hours a week of commitment. A lot of schools will do like a per course credit, like they'll give you like 3 credits of research, or they'll even pay you. I think it's better to do the course credit. Like I got every semester that I was involved, I got an A factored into my GPA, which was really great. Like why I for minimum, like I was in a position where I was looking at like I can do like a minimum wage sort of situation, or I can do like for credit. And I was like, you know what, I'm building my future. Like I want to have a higher GPA whenever possible. Like I'm gonna take that option. So like I said, tell them about your availability up front. Tell them kind of your willingness, and maybe within a paragraph, just say like kind of some of your skills that you think you could bring to the table. If you have any prior research experience, of course, that's great. But I think the first email maybe should just be like, would you be willing to meet and discuss? Like, of course, it's almost like a dual interview process where you have to be wanting to work in their lab and do the things they're asking you of, but they also have to deal with you. So like that's kind of the 2 parts of that. So yeah, I guess the summary, right? The summary of what I just said is just your availability, your experiences, and your willingness to work and kind of be a contributor, like an active member of a lab group, and just kind of see if they're willing to just meet with you, discuss. I think a lot of these things come through better when you're meeting with someone and speaking with someone than through email. So those are some of my recommendations.
And I think you're talking about like with the research, like you can use that as credit. I think at Stony Brook, if you have research experience, like if you're doing research, they give you like credits. You don't have to take like an upper division lab course, so they can like get you out of it. So like
that's great. No, that's what can be done. I would totally recommend that, because some of those upper lab courses, like no matter how much time you put into something, they can probably like dock you for some reason on the rubric. Like this is a better, like I think it's a more
it's like a win-win kind of thing if you can get it. So I just want to ask a little bit more. So when you first started your research, did you start out strong, or did you have to like learn? You have to get trained, and then did you have to like learn everything? How long did it take to learn everything, and then also start doing meaningful things, meaningful actions that actually you thought that contributed to the project itself? Like how long did it take to get to that point? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so something that I experienced, and I know a lot of my friends experienced, they'll start you off with something that's very like mundane, like the kind of the work that no one wants to know, the grad students want to do, and that's very normal. And I think that's totally okay. And I think people should go into research experience expecting that and being very okay with that, because like you should be kind of honored that they've accepted you into their group. Like a lot of these grad students go through a very similar rigorous process to get into these groups. For example, if they're doing their PhD program, as we would do if we're going into a dental program. So it's very selective, and you know, I think you should just be willing and okay with doing the work that's very kind of mundane, like I said. What I did though personally is after doing that work for a little bit, I kind of talked to my PI, and I was lucky to have a good relationship with him, and just explained to him where I'm trying to go, where I'm heading, what's my end goal. And of course, it was to go into dental school. And I explained, like, I really do want to involve myself with as many kind of skills within the lab as possible. And I said, ultimately, it would be great if I could be involved in some sort of publication. I think the PIs know that that's generally like what people are looking for if they're like a pre-health major and not like not going into a PhD program. Like it would be helpful. You don't need to have a publication by any means, but it does help. I mean, it's something that you can just list on the resume, for example, and you can talk about in an interview. So my PI was very understanding of that. And then at that point, we kind of reevaluated, looked at my schedule, and he said, here are some things that we need help with. Here's where you can step up, for example. I started doing a literature review for him where I was looking at taste genes associated with dental caries. So if it's not enough initially, you can definitely ask to step it up, and a lot of the PIs will be receptive towards that. And then in terms of the learning curve, yeah, at first it was tough because I was jumping into something where everyone around me knew everything and I knew nothing. And I didn't take immunology, which was huge for my project because I was looking at inflammation associated with obesity and kind of how it affects like the oral mucosa and things like that. So I had to learn a lot of it by myself, watching YouTube videos. Ninja Nerd is great, something I actually use in dental school. It's a YouTube channel. And kind of just, I was lucky to have a grad student that I worked with that was really great at explaining things. So it does take a little bit of time to get to where you should be to feel comfortable kind of holding a conversation with your PI or other grad students. But definitely ask questions. You shouldn't feel like the relationship you should have with your PI and a grad student, for example, should be very calm. It should be very informative and educational. Like it shouldn't be something where you like hate being there because they yell at you and things like so. Don't put yourself in a situation like that, obviously. Hopefully that answers your question.
Right. And I feel like a lot of pre-dentals need to consider, not being in a research lab that they hate being in, and kind of choosing something that they it's contributing to their future, what they want to do in the future, uh, or just something they enjoy. Honestly, like it doesn't have to be medically or dental related. To be honest, it's just something that when you go in every day, you have a clear purpose and you like know that this is going to help you and something that you really enjoy doing. So on that note, I just want to talk about, the DAT and the application and the personal statement, things like that. Can you just run us through your application? How you approached these different tasks, like the DAT, personal statement, rec letters, everything essentially.
Yeah, for sure. So I knew that the first thing you need to know is if you're trying to take a gap year or not, and that kind of changes the schedule and the timeline. So I knew I didn't want to take a gap year. I knew that I wanted to go straight from undergrad to dental school. Being that I'm looking to specialize, I don't want to spend an extra year or two just doing something in the interim. I'd kind of rather just go right into school. So that was something that I decided very early on. So I took my DAT in my winter break of my junior. Wait, let me just make sure this is right. I took my DAT my winter break of my junior year. I'm pretty sure. I think. I'll get back to you guys. But then I remember because by the end of senior year, I kind of knew where I was going to school. I had interviews during February of senior year, I think February, March, April of senior year. So that I guess makes sense. Let me think. Personal statement. I started also, I think, about around when I finished my DAT. Because I had to have that into ADSAS. Well, so my school had a committee letter So by February, I had to have everything into my school. So I had to have like a pretty good draft of my personal statement. But then I had from February to I think June or July when the portal opens to like actually um, to submit the personal statement. I think I'm botching this entire timeline. So forgive me if I'm wrong, but like you can interrupt and tell me like that doesn't make any sense. But basically,
I
I
think you
was
probably
pretty
took your
proactive with
DAT
everything,
like
and I had everything in as early as
winter
possible,
of junior
and
year,
highly
right?
recommend that. Yeah, probably. You guys may
So
interject.
then you
Does that
probably
make this?
applied
Am
like
I
in the
making sense?
summer after junior year, and then you're good after that.
Well,
Basically.
so I was interviewed. I guess so. Yeah, because I knew where I was going to school
Right.
senior year. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think the interviews go into like the next year. So like, you apply June, then you start hearing back like, I don't know, like this December, January, February, something like that. Somewhere around there.
Something like that. You're gonna have another podcast guest to check in for me. That's right. It's not me though.
We'll have like the dental school admissions team on here or something like that.
Perfect.
Yeah, so for those, pre-dentals that don't even know what the interview process is, like, can you give like a little definition of what it is and like why it's such an important part of the whole application?
Yeah. So I think so. I was the first COVID year, so I was fully virtual interviews, and I think some schools are still doing virtual. It actually saves people a lot of money. It's very convenient. Um, but I think the interview process is like the make or break, and I don't say that to like stress people out, but I think it's like actually an advantage for most people to have the interview process. So if you're lucky enough to get there, this is essentially the level. Like it's an even playing field at this point because you've applied and now you're amongst a pool of people that have in their eyes, the admissions committee's eyes, you're all on the same page. You all have great grades, whatever they are. You all have a good DAT score, whether that be a 30 or an 18 or a 7, whatever it is that your equation that kind of got you there. You're all even at this point. They're not going to look back at your DAT after the interview and compare you with someone who got a 25 versus a 20 because they don't care about it. They've already shown that they care about that. That is now out the window. So this is why the interview is huge because you're going to be with people and they're all going to come from different backgrounds, different schools, and it really doesn't matter because this is your time to be you, be yourself. And this is something that I really enjoyed because I was able to figure out early on that you can sway the interview process and the questions in any way that you want. And it's actually fun to do that. They'll ask you a question, you answer the question as much as you want, and then you just start talking about something else, or you ask them a question, and it's literally cruise control from there because they just want to see that you can have a conversation with someone. They don't really, they're going to ask you questions like, tell me about your research. They're going to ask you the boring questions like, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. They don't really care. I'm sorry, but I've spoken with people at my school. They just want to see how you respond to these things. Another one that comes to mind is like they'll always ask you about your hand skills, right? Like you've heard this question, you've seen it on Student Doctor Network. Well, the behind the scenes is that they really don't care because nothing translates to dental. Everyone will learn how to use a handpiece, and everyone's going to learn how to complete these procedures. I had a professor who said his favorite part of the interview process is to ask about the hand skills because he loves it when people make up these cockamamie explanations, these relations that don't make any sense. And then he loves watching the pre-dental student try to answer and explain why it would be useful within dentistry. It doesn't matter. He said it would be actually better if you say, I actually don't have any hand skills that would lead me to be a better practitioner one day. Sure, like I can tell you, oh, I played viola when I was 6, but like that doesn't really there's no relation there. So if you have something like let's say you are an artist or you do play piano, yes, mention it, of course. Like sure, they want to hear that. That's the traditional answer. But like if you like took a cooking class and like you think that like sprinkling salt into something is like hand skills, like don't say that because it just doesn't make any sense. I hope you guys follow where I'm going with this. So that's some of this interview process. I'm trying to think of should we pause there? I have a lot of things to talk about with interviews. So
Yeah, and I think it's important to make the distinction between like what you should say, not say on an interview, and things that are actually applicable to dentistry, instead of just saying things that I guess anybody could do. But yeah, so how would you describe the interview process in like a word or two?
um, hmm. Wow, that's a really, I gotta think of the word. Uh, I would say like, I don't know if I can do it in one word, but I could say to you that, like
Maybe
what
like
I
a couple
mentioned,
words. Honestly, a
a
couple words
couple,
is fine
you'll
too.
give me a couple to work with. Okay, thank you. Um, I would just say this is, I don't know if I could do it. Uh, like I said before, when you kind of are asked a question, take it where you want. That's how kind of how my experience was. And so, like I said, they'll ask you a question, you just be yourself, answer the question, and then talk about something interesting that you think they'd be interested in hearing about.
Right. Were you anxious, nervous, excited before your interview? Like, how did that feel? How did the whole process actually go?
Okay, yeah. So I was not calm. I I tried to come off calm, and I hopefully was able to, but definitely stress. I mean, it is stressful, right? Uh, Even you can tell yourself 100 times, and you can practice your why dentistry question, for example, like 100 times, and feel like you got it down. But then once you're actually sitting there, and like for a lot of the pre-dentals who are kind of on coming up, for example, you might have in-person interviews, which I didn't have. You're not in the comfort of sitting in your your room in your desk chair. Like it is going to be stressful, and it's like something. But you once you kind of get through that first question, you just take a step back. Like I said, realize that they just want to have a conversation with you. I've never been grilled on an interview. I never had a question where I wasn't able to answer. I've had times where they would ask a question, and I would say, like, 1 second, let me think about that. And they said, like, take as much time as you need. Like, it really is, they're humans. Like, they're, at the end of the day, like, they're the same dentists that you've shadowed and you've come to love and wrote your letters of recommendation. Like, these are just nice people at the end of the day. They're not trying to grill you. So that's something that you just keep in mind. Like I said, the first question is going to be stressful, but you'll get into a groove and everyone's going to be okay.
So did you know from the beginning like which schools you want to apply to and like how'd you narrow them down?
Yeah, so I knew a few schools I didn't want to apply to just because of cost and location, and like even though like of course I didn't want to go like like really far from home, for example. So I had like maybe a list of 20 that I narrowed down to like 15. So I think I applied to around there, and then I knew Stony Brook was always a number kind of one of those schools that if I get into Stony Brook, I really have to consider Stony Brook. And then I kind of went from the 15. I had 15, I think 14 or 15 schools that I applied to. I got interviews at nine. I got into all nine that I interviewed at. And then from there, I narrowed it down to four. And we can talk about the specifics if you want. But I do you want to hear like some schools I was considering and then what kind of made me
Yeah, sure.
feel
So
that?
you just get like a little scale of, where Stony Brook fit in your.
Yeah. So basically, at the end of the day, I was between Michigan, University of Pennsylvania, Stony Brook, and Buffalo. Michigan kind of was the first to go because I was thinking to myself, why spend the extra money for a state school where I'm out of state? And I was lucky enough to get into Stony Brook and Buffalo. So while Michigan would have been a great experience in terms of like the athletics and like kind of like that big name school, like I felt I got that personally in undergrad. So I didn't know if I needed to spend the extra money for myself to go to Michigan. And I know someone who goes to Michigan. She seems to really love it. So it's a great school, and it's you know there's nothing wrong with going to Michigan. I just personally I thought I was going to narrow down between Penn, Stony, and Buffalo. Um, and then Buffalo was the next to go off the list just because I figured I'm from Long Island, like it's kind of just like a real hassle to do the whole upstate thing again. Like I did it for undergrad from coming from Long Island up to Ithaca, New York. I felt I had that experience. The only thing holding me back from Stony at that point was like looking at the class size. For anyone listening, Stony Brook has like the second smallest class size behind Harvard. Harvard has like 34 or 35, and then Stony Brook has 45 or 46, depending on the year. So I was thinking to myself, like, small class size can go one of two ways. I could really love everyone in my class, or, I might not love everyone in my class. I've actually come to love everyone in my class, so I'm really happy that I chose Stony Brook. But Buffalo was ultimately the next to go. Another reason Buffalo was off the list was because I didn't want to be ranked. And I also wanted a GPA. So I can talk about that quickly. Being that I know or I'm really strongly considering specializing at this point, I felt that when I was applying to residency, I didn't want and especially like through my years of school, I didn't want to know that I was like number 20 out of 95, for example, at Buffalo. Like I didn't really think that that was a healthy way to go about it for me. I also like feel like at Stony Brook, I talked to a lot of people who went there. Um, the ranking, no ranking really helps because no one's really that competitive with each other because there's no reason to be. Like there's no curb. Everybody can get an A if everyone does well on something. Whereas some of these ranked schools, you might have some of that gatekeeping in terms of like study guides and things like that. So I was like, you know what, who I am, and I've always been a collaborative learner. Like I was between Penn and Stony Brook at this point, and then I was like, okay, let's look at the financials here. And then UPenn was just way too expensive for what I was kind of considering. At the end of the day, like we're all going to be a dentist, so like if you can get into your state school, I would highly recommend it. I don't really see why not. I'm sure there are arguments for going to UPenn over Stony Brook in terms of specializing, maybe, but Stony Brook has had 100% match rate for the last few years, and it's pretty much anyone, whatever you're trying to specialize in, you're able to get into. So I was like, let's do Stony Brook. I'm 20 minutes from home, but I actually live closer to the school with four of the guys from my class. So I kind of made it feel like I was going away to college, even though I'm really close to home. But that was my process.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, Stony Brook is obviously like the best choice.
Obviously.
Just when I was applying like college, I wanted to go to like BU, but Stony Brook was right here, and it was like just great connections and stuff like that. So I just kind of chose to stay close. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of factors to choose when it comes to deciding on a school. So what are some like resources pre-dentals can use to prepare for that interview to get into their schools of choice and that they really want to get into?
I think the best resource is to go on some of these Facebook groups that exist and finding current students who are willing to talk about their experiences. Um, this is not something that this is totally allowed. This is something that like you're allowed to speak with upperclassmen and just hear kind of what their interview day was like. First of all, the questions change every year, so that was a concern. That's not something to worry about. But they can really give you like the real deal, like what it was like for them, and like what you guys were alluding to earlier. Like, how did you feel on the interview? Did you feel pressured? Did you feel like there was questions that you weren't able to field? Those are good things to know going in. So I think the number one resource is reaching out to students who go there. And I'm sure any school you look at, there will be people willing to talk about their experiences. If anyone's looking to go to Stony Brook, you can hit me up. I'm always down to talk about it. That's the first thing. One thing I would stay away from is Student Doctor Network. It's like the worst thing that's ever been created. Somehow everyone on those forums has a 35 on their DAT, even though it's only at a 30. Like, everyone loves to talk anonymously on this thing. So I would stay away from there to really learn what the school is like. And of course, like talking with the admissions committee, with people who work there, they would actually probably like to see that you're taking an interest at an early point within your within your process of applying. I think some of the reason why I actually didn't hear back from some of the schools I did is because it seemed like I was just applying to apply. Whereas if I kind of had shown that long-term interest, that might have helped. I know that matters in undergrad decisions. I've talked to the admissions committee like years back, and they said, when students come on tours, we really know that they're interested in applying here. They're not just applying here because their stats line up. So anything you could do to show that a little bit of interest for that sustained period of time, I would highly recommend.
So you talked about how your interviews were virtual, obviously because it was during COVID.
Yeah.
So can you like walk us through how the entire experience was, like maybe getting the interview and then like in the waiting room, like, and then actually getting there, and maybe some questions they asked you and how your own experience went down?
Yeah. So I remember getting my first interview invite. I got so excited. It was from Rutgers, and I was like so pumped. And it was actually in person. So for me at that point, and during COVID was really big to go in person. And I remember getting there and being so excited. And it really is exactly what you would expect it to be. You kind of sit in a room. There's some intros, and this goes for Zoom and in person, pretty much for everything I'm saying here. But there'll be some intros. They'll talk about financial aid. They'll do like the dean will come and speak. They want to like get you settled in. They're not going to like start like bombarding you with interview questions like right when you first get there. And every school of mine had exact like a one-on-one process. Buffalo had like a two faculty with one student. That doesn't really change like the dynamic of the interview. It was very relaxed. Like I said, I know Michigan, they did I forgot what it's called. But it's basically like an MMI, multiple mini interview. And it was all a recorded software. So I would log into this thing and they would just ask me like a variety of random questions and my answers would be recorded. And one of them was like, do you think we should impose a sugar tax? One of them was like, one of your dental professionals who you work with is like 85 years old and you're noticing that he's forgetting, things here and there. Like, what do you recommend to do? So it was a lot of like ethical questions. That was Michigan, for example. So that one was definitely tough. But let me think. So I guess your question was specifically like kind of take you through the day. What was the question again?
Yeah, like take us through the interview, like how, what kind of questions
Okay,
they asked
gotcha.
you, like how'd you respond? Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. So always be prepared for a few different things. So the first question is always going to be tell me about yourself. Like pretty much 95% of the time it'll be telling me about yourself. Um, and so when you think of this answer, you shouldn't just regurgitate your personal statement. That's a lot of things that I saw my friends trying to do. And now that I've kind of gone through the process and I was really had a great interview success, I would really recommend trying to step away from the things that they've already read about you and know about you. This is your chance to tell them like, yeah, I love like the New York Knicks and like I love like, if you're like into knitting, like yeah, talk about it. Like they want to hear like some of the fun stuff that you haven't talked about in your process. So that's the tell me about yourself. I would try to get that no more than 2 minutes. I would start talking about maybe where you're from and go from kind of a little bit about your family life and then kind of a little bit about your school and what you do because it makes sense kind of when you're telling someone about yourself. But again, they know this about you. And then talk about those interests, what, who you associate with, like what your friends would say about like just there are ways to make yourself kind of give a different perspective for your application. So that's tell me about yourself. You have to be prepared for that. The next question is the why dentistry question. Again, don't really regurgitate a personal statement, but really be clear here because the statement is a chance for you to be like use like kind of tell a story, tell a narrative. You're going to be integrating thoughts and feelings. You can be very direct here, and I think I would recommend that. I would say in every one of these answers, after my little intro, I would kind of talk about what I mentioned earlier about my dentist and how he's fueled my passion. But you might want to say like, I want to be a dentist because, and then name 3 things. So for me, it was like working with people and kind of that combination with entrepreneurship, kind of the love for science that I had, and the artistic nature of being a dentist. So you want to be very clear. The why dentistry question. You want to be clear and confident. That's the next thing. So
Just want
those
to
are the
hop in
2.
real quick. So
Yeah.
like I think a common misconception is like people think that when they ask why dentistry, it has to be one thing. But like I just kind of like started learning this recently. It can be like multiple things. Like,
Absolutely.
as I'm doing my undergrad too, I'm just thinking like there's multiple reasons why. There could be like a physical reason, like a mental reason, you know, many different reasons. So like I think people get caught up on there has to be one reason why, but I guess that's not
Absolutely.
the case.
No, you want to. I think it's a good idea to show that you're like aware that there's multiple. Like, there's a lot of things that go into this career. I would stay away from talking about like the lifestyle. I'm seeing that like a lot of people think that's a good idea to talk about. Like, this is why I'm considering dentistry over medicine, for example. But like, they know that, and it's kind of taboo to talk about the lifestyle because like you're going through 4 years of dental school, and then you have residency, regardless of whatever like either for general all the way up to any sort of specialty. It's not something that I would talk about. That's just something, just like a random thing that I just thought of. But yeah, it could be lots of reasons. And then a third thing I was prepared for to talk about was why not medicine. I was asked this one time, like, why do you want to go to med school, for example? Because let's be honest, like anyone in these applications could have taken the MCAT because the only difference is really studying like a physics section, and like that's kind of I think the only difference between the MCAT and the DAT. And you were in the classes with pre-dentals. Everyone really did well, did well in those science classes. So just be prepared to answer that. Like I said, I had it one time, and just think about that for yourself. Like, why is dentistry something you'd prefer over medicine? So those are the 3 big things you need to think about. in the interview. And like I said, tell me about yourself, and the why dentistry always came up. Why not medicine was just one time. And then if you're going to prepare a little bit more, I would think about strengths and weaknesses for yourself. I mentioned before, they don't really care, but I think if you can articulate your thoughts nicely and succinctly, that's something that's important. And then the biggest thing I would have in your back pocket is like, think of an ethical dilemma you've been in, and then think of a challenge you faced. Because these are questions that you can answer regardless of what the question is. Like, they can ask it in a different way, or you can bring it up. These are just things that you might not have like necessarily on your application. They might be in some supplementals, but the challenge was a big one. That's something they always asked. For me, I was actually a transfer. I talked about like the challenges involved in that, ethical dilemma, whatever, whatever the case may be. I know a lot of students would talk about like, not necessarily cheating, but like academic dishonesty, like talk about you might have an experience with that, and whatever it may be. So those are like some of the big five, I would say. So I'll say it again. Tell me about yourself. Why dentistry? Why not medicine? Strengths and weaknesses / like challenge, and then like your ethical dilemma.
Right. So as you mentioned, why not medicine?
Why not medicine? Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I'm actually prepared to answer it. So let me think. What did I? Well, my answer was I talked to a lot of dentists, and like it really comes down to that no dentist has ever disliked their job. And like whenever I said that during an interview, well, the one time I did, and I would bring it up other times, all the interviews would like laugh, because it is true. Like every dentist really does love their job, and because you're able to make your practice and your career kind of, I guess, like practice in a way that you enjoy. So whether that be working less days per week, or like kind of having a practice that it's not, the volume of cases isn't as high. Like these are some things that you can modulate in your career. Whereas in medicine, like you don't really have as much control over those sorts of things. Another thing I mentioned, why not medicine, is because I think dentistry is like a happier career. You're able to really like fix people's ailments, attend to people's ailments, like with that kind of instant gratification sort of vibe, where it's like, someone comes in with pain, you can fix it. Whereas medicine is not really like that as much. A lot of things are out of your control, and it can lead to like a sadder situation for some patients, at least these chronic long-term illnesses. And so for me, that's kind of the two things I talked about.
So how was the D1? How was your D1 year, and how was the curriculum like? Did you guys like touch hand pieces yet? Like, how was that? How was the transition from undergrad to your to D1 year?
Yeah. So Stony Brook starts you off in the medical school. So you're full on with the med students. You're taking OSCEs with them. OSCE is like a clinical assessment where a patient comes in and they talk about like sort of like you kind of interview them in a sense, and you ask about their symptoms, and you look at lab values that are made up, and then you have to diagnose them with something. Then you take a quiz or a / exam, whatever it is. So this is like full on medical school. So we took anatomy and biochem for the first 2 or 3 weeks just by themselves when we first got there after orientation. This was to give us time to adjust to school, but these classes are very intense. And I can talk about these in greater detail, but I'll give the overview, and then you ask any questions that you have following. So anatomy and biochem, and it was a gross anatomy, so we had a cadaver lab. Really, really like awesome experience. So if you're looking at a school that has gross anatomy, I would look into that further, and I think that's something that is a really great experience to have. So those are the first 2 courses, and after that we took immunology essentially, and then we took like a basic mechanisms of disease class, where we talked about cancer, different blood pathologies. Like these are some foundational concepts that a lot of first year medical students take an equivalent course. So after that, we then took some dental morphology. This is where you look at the shapes and the structure of different teeth, and you learn about dental specific anatomy of each tooth. I actually hated this class. I had never hated a class more. This is a class where we had to do those wax ups. I'm sure you guys have probably heard about it, but for those who haven't, you heat up like white wax, and then you shape a tooth from scratch almost. And it's fun for 5 minutes, but then after that, it wasn't fun for me because I wasn't that great at it. So that was dental morphology. Some other classes we took was periodontics. So it's looking at like the relationship that the teeth have with the gums and supporting structures. And then we were kind of fully in the dental school at this point. So this was kind of midway through, and this is when we were like bombarded with a bunch of different classes. We took like a community, like a public health dentistry class. We took what else did we take? Let me look at my whatever. We took a bunch of other classes, and they all went so quickly. And somehow I got through it all. And then we also took dental operatives. So to answer your question about the hand pieces, yes, we did start working with hand pieces. We could basically do cavity preparations and then restoration. So we did both composite and amalgam. Um, and it was a really fun experience because dental school is Stony Brook has a simulation lab, so you can pull out the mannequin from the wall, and you have your loops, like your glasses with the magnifying glasses, like make sure you sit up straight, and when you look through them. And so yeah, that was a fun experience. And so we did a lot of assignments. It was very quick moving. And then now we're going to start operative 2 when we start D2 year, which is like crowns and things like that.
So I think I saw your Instagram page, like the picture of you in the chair with the man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So like how is your like your hand-eye coordination? Have you seen it improve since you first got there? And like your familiarity with teeth, like has it become, are you like one with the tooth now, or are you just still getting
No, I think I'm like almost there. So sometimes I'm getting really good. You don't think about this a lot, but like, so maybe for someone who hasn't thought about it, I'll give you like what I thought originally. Of course, I knew there were like tooth numbers, but I didn't really like put into perspective how important it is, how specific you are in terms of how you describe a tooth and a certain location on a tooth. And there are so many new vocabulary words that entered my mind and like my vernaculum, like during the first year of school. And so there's like mesial, buccal, proximal, lingual, like, and it's like, it takes a little bit to like get your brain to adjust to these things. But now you can say like the distobuccal cusp on tooth 23, and then like, well, whatever, maybe 16 or something like that. And then it's like, I can like think of that a little quicker than I was at first. So one with the tooth, like almost there. That's the first thing. And then I don't know. There's with the hand skills. It's like at first it was fun. It's always fun at first, and then you like realize like I actually have to be really good at this. So then you take a step back, and it's definitely challenging because not only are you drilling with one little drill on the end of your handpiece, but then there's like different drills for different things, and then there's different speeds of the drill, and it's like it's a lot all at once. And what I found in at least Stony Brook is there's good instruction up front. There's really great theoretical explanation of everything. This is what we're supposed to do. Here's what it should look like. But then in reality, they're like, okay, now you go and try it. And just by the sheer number of faculty, like you have to kind of, you're not like, no one's holding your hand the whole time. So you really have to just like figure it out. And it's actually, sometimes it's tough when you don't know how to do something, but like at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm going to try this. And then I know what it should look like. It didn't end up looking like that. So I'm going to try something else next time. And by going through that process, like it does help you kind of have things stick in your mind, and you get better just by practicing and trying to drill. So for example, like there's something called a class 2 preparation, where it's like the cavity is between two teeth that are touching, and then they might include the occlusal surface, which is like where your teeth bite and then where they touch. And so, for example, I learned that I like to use a different drill when I go in between the teeth, as opposed to a drill that I can do on top of the tooth, the occlusal surface. Again, these are just preferences, but these are things you have to figure out as you go. And I've gotten better for sure. We started with these little blocks that are meant for like dental students to learn how to drill, and they have little shapes, and they're like, it's like an S, and they're like, you have to stay within the lines. And I remember looking at this thing as if there's no way I could stay within these, like this millimeter. I was like, there's no way I couldn't even do this with a pencil, let alone like a drill that's rotating 200,000 times per second. Like, and so like, yeah, it was like a fun thing. And then, but now I feel like I could do it. I'm getting better. A lot of it's like knowing how to sit and like using a fulcrum finger to like keep your hand stable and steady. These weren't things that were explained to me early on. I don't know how familiar you guys are with these things, but I figured I would explain them. But you know, you get better with time is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I'm sure as you go on and continue on to your D2 year, I'm pretty sure you're going to get much better with your hand skills. I know, it's like a completely different, it's a completely different like world from undergrad, right? Like dental school, this is what you're doing now. You're using your hands all the time. So like eventually, yeah, you will get better. Everyone probably gets better, and I'm personally I'm excited to see how I fare in that game when it comes time, hopefully. Um, so yeah, you talked about, you know, a little bit about that D1. So how's the D1 curriculum, and like how have you been able to balance your time? I know it probably consists of a lot of academic work, dexterity work. So how have you been juggling and managing your time and maintaining your social life outside of dental school?
Yeah, so that's definitely was a struggle at first. Um, I mentioned before, like I work on the weekends, so I work multiple events for the balloon twisting on the weekends, and I know that I really only have mornings and then I have nights, but being that I work 5 hours a day, 5 to 6 hours a day on Saturday, 5 or 6 hours, basically I'm a large chunk of my weekend is taken out. And then when I'm able to work and able to study, I'm exhausted. So like time management for me, I need coffee. Like that's like no matter what I'm doing, I need to drink. Like I have to be like I got to turn myself on somehow. So that's one of the keys for me. But during the week, I you just have to be as proactive as possible. Like for example, like at first I would go into operative, which we had on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 5, and I would drill, and then I would be like, oh, I'll come back on the weekend and I'll finish this. As opposed to just staying there where I have all my instruments set up, like everything's already there. You'll find that it takes a long time to like set up everything, put the rubber dam on. So like try to just be as proactive as you can in the moment. Another thing is like sometimes you don't need to pay attention in lecture as much as you could actually be doing something else in lecture, or you could be doing two things at once, like having a split screen open on your computer. One side, like taking any sort of notes that the professor says that aren't on the slides, and then the other side, you could be doing Anki decks, for example. I'd be happy to talk about Anki too. I really love Anki. Um, and like I always know that I want to have time to go to the gym, so that's something that I really factor in. And I told myself before I go into dental school, like my body is like something that I really like. My overall health is something that's really important to me, and especially in dentistry, it's a career that's like physically demanding. Not only like on your back, and if you're not doing a lot of movement throughout the day, like you're kind of sitting still. Like that's why I always allot time to go to the gym and be active. I'm lucky that I live like 2 minutes from my gym, so I'm able to like even if it's like a 45-minute workout. Like sure, I'd love to be there for an hour and a half, but like whatever it is I get to do, like I'm happy with it. Like if it's going for a run around the block, yeah, I'll make time for it. Because at the end of the day, like compounded, like even if you take 3 to 5 hours a week to be like active, it really won't make too much of a difference as long as you're just staying on top of your stuff. Of course, if you're crunched, like you're in your time crunch, like yeah, you can't like you're gonna have to make sacrifices, of course. So those are some priorities for me. In terms of like socializing, it's good that I would recommend living with people in your class if it's possible, because you kind of like come home after a long day and you can like, you can have like you can just like talk and have fun in your house, and then everyone gets to work because they're all dental students. Like they all know that they have to study. It's not like undergrad. Undergrad, I felt like there were a lot of people around me that like didn't like wait to the last minute for everything. I was always someone who like wanted to be generally on top of things. Of course, like not all the time, but like to the best of my ability. Um, and so, like, I think if you want to have a social life in dental school, you absolutely can. Like, no, you might hear that you might not be able to. It's totally possible. Um, I would say, like, conservatively, like, you have 2 days out of the month to like not study, not think about school. You can go like to New York City. You can do whatever you want, and you can probably make more too if you're able to stay on top of your stuff.
Yeah, so you mentioned you like to do Anki, helps you stay on top of things. I've heard a lot of people like not use Anki, people that use it. So how'd you kind of make that distinction? Like, I want to use this, it's helping me. Like, and when did you start doing that?
But yeah, so in the med school, so a lot of the first year medical students, regardless of what school they're at, they all have to take the step one exam. So there are pre-made Anki decks for the step one exam that would coincide exactly with the stuff that we're learning in class. So being that I had the decks made for me already during that first like 6, 7, 8 months in med school, I knew that once I started using it, I felt that it was really effective. And it's based on spatial repetition. So it's not just regular flashcards. It will present you flashcards that you struggled with in the past in a way that somehow it like burns it into your brain. So being that they were pre-made for me early on was helpful. And then as we got to dental school, and I didn't have these like databases with Anki cards, but essentially like my friends and I all, I would make a deck for something. My other friends would make a deck for another class, and we would just share the decks amongst ourselves. And it really is it's a really weird process, but it works. Like if you get through the Anki deck, even if you do it one time, you'll retain it, for the day or two after. But if you get through the deck a few times, like you will retain it for like an extended period of time. And I think it's something you should at least look into. It's a little intimidating first, the program. It's not like very user friendly, but there's tutorials on YouTube. There's definitely upperclassmen at whatever school you go to that use Anki. So I would recommend it.
Nice. So you mentioned you have a business. Is that the balloon business you're talking about?
Yeah.
Right. Do you have like, I looked on your Instagram. Do you have like another affiliation with another business, organization, something like that?
Yeah. So I actually, okay. So it's Students of Dentistry on Instagram. And we run 3 different pages. So Students of Dentistry, Elite Dentists, and Top Dental Practices. And here we feature dental students doing their thing and sharing their stories. And we share this on our Instagram pages, and we have over 250,000 net followers. So it's a really great place to begin. So if there's anyone out there listening and you're looking to share your experiences in dental school, maybe start your own personal page where you share your experiences, we'd be happy to feature you there. And I do this with 2 other students who were Stony Brook alum. They're both in their residencies right now, one in ortho at Stony Brook, another one at OMFS at NYU. And so this is something I'm able to fit in as well. We hold like weekly Zoom sessions, informative information sessions, and connect students with mentors at school. So it's fun for me. I enjoy this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So Brandon, thanks for all your insights today. How can pre-dentals reach out to you? If they have any questions or concerns, or just want to know how dental school is like.
Yeah, the best is to reach out to me on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Brandon Axelrod. Axelrod's AXELROD. And I'm sure you can put maybe some of this in the show description or anything like that. But that's the best way. And I'm always willing to answer questions, no matter what the question is. And I really want to thank you guys for having me. This was really, really fun.
Yeah, so that kind of concludes our episode of the Dose of Dental podcast. Thank you, Brandon, for joining me and sharing your experience as a D1. Your insight was definitely valuable, and I hope our pre-dental listeners will feel the same. Everyone, please feel free to reach out to Brandon at his socials if you have any further questions. Lastly, I thank everyone for listening, and if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to follow us on Instagram and Spotify, and we will see you next time for another Dose of Dental.